Alright, now it's time to learn how to read music. I would encourage you to look at this lesson and review this lesson many times until you've mastered all the material before proceeding, because you're going to find that these skills are really money in the bank as far as learning how to play the violin is concerned. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is how to get this document. So, if you can go to the attachment section of this lesson, you'll see that there's a file called the names of the notes, and you can print that out for your own viewing pleasure as we continue on this journey. Once you have done that, I'd like you to have a look at the fact that there are a group of 5 lines here and a group of 5 lines there. So we have 2 groups of 5 lines on top of each other. Whenever you have a group of 5 lines, that's called a musical staff, or known as a stave in England. Now, those lines have names. On the top, I've named them the E line, the G line, the B line, the D line, and the F line. Now you'll notice that I've put corresponding notes on each of those lines. Now those notes are just represented by circles. A circle, which is representative of a note, is called a whole note. So we have an E whole note, a G whole note, a B whole note, a D whole note, and an F whole note. A whole note lasts for 4 beats. What is a beat? A beat is just a unit of time, which can be as fast or as slow as we want. So if we were to play it, we would go E, G, B, you get the idea, etc. But we're not really talking at the moment about whole notes. We're talking about how to read the music. So there's a really cool mnemonic to remember this. It goes like this: every good boy deserves fudge. Again, every good boy deserves fudge. So if you remember that and just repeat that to yourself in the shower every day, you'll remember it in about 3 or 4 days and never think of it again. Now, the next thing is, between those 5 lines we have 4 spaces. This is one space, another space, another space, and another space. Now, that's a very easy thing to remember in terms of knowing the notes. F, A, C, E. What does that spell? Face. So we have every good boy deserves fudge and face. You can draw yourself a nice smiley face. Just remember that if you need to. Now, another thing we need to talk about is this symbol. What does that symbol mean? That is called a treble clef. Treble means that we're playing an instrument with high sounds. Now I know you're thinking the G string is not a high sound, and this is correct. But by and large, if you compare it to a cello or a bass, we're still playing high sounds. So that's what this tells us, but it also tells us something else. Another name of the treble clef is called the G clef. Why G? Well, it's kind of hard to notice, but if you look at the treble clef, it squiggles around. There's like a, it kind of comes around that way. And that squiggle around goes across the G line, so it's telling you where the note G is. I like to draw my treble clefs with my squiggle actually stopping on the G line to make it even more obvious, although most people don't do that. It just crosses the G line. So if you know that, that's also going to help you. Now, another thing we are going to talk about is the fact that you've got this little number here, number 1, and you have a number 2 here. Well, that's not really telling us anything exciting, except that we have the first bar and the second bar. Well, what's a bar? Another name for a bar is a measure. We're going to use the word measure more often. A measure is a distance from here to here. And here to here just means from the beginning until the first vertical line, called a bar line. Now, then we go on. Beginning of the line to a double bar line. A double bar line means that the piece is over. So whenever you have a single bar line, that's just a division. When you have a double bar line, it means it's the end. And all music, at least before the first half of the 20th century, by and large, has bar lines. Now the next thing is we're going to talk about these numbers and these numbers. That's called a time signature, and we're going to go into more of that later. And if you don't completely understand what I'm about to say, that's okay. I'd just like you to kind of hear what a time signature is. A time signature tells us two things. It tells us how many beats are in a measure, that is the distance from the beginning to the bar line, or in some cases when you have other bars in a line, you have one bar line to another bar line. So it tells us how many beats are in a measure, and it also tells us which kind of note gets the beat. So I'm going to explain what that means in this context. Well, the 5 is the easiest. The 5 tells us how many beats in a measure. So we have 5 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The number 1 tells us that the whole note gets the beat. A number 1 stands for a whole note. That's just something you have to memorize. So we have a whole note getting the beat. But you know what? You could have other kinds of notes getting the beat. And we're going to talk about that in more detail later. We're not going to go into detail now about that. Now, let's talk about the 4 one. Well, in this case, the number 4 on top tells us there are 4 beats in the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the 1 on the bottom tells us that the whole note gets the beat. So that's the whole note. So that's what I'm going to say about that for now. And the next thing, which we're going to talk about, is how to figure out what key you're in and what a key is.